And we come to an interesting topic of AI, artificial intelligence, and personhood. I'm curious, what are your thoughts and feelings about AI? Do you tend to think about the possibilities of what it could become? Maybe you get excited about that. Or do you maybe lean on more of a fearful side of the unknown? What are we really dealing with here? What could it become? It is a hot topic in culture right now because of its potential for good and its potential for bad. Microsoft founder Bill Gates has said that the power of artificial intelligence is, quote, so incredible, it will change society in some very deep ways. The world hasn't had that many technologies that are both promising and dangerous. We had nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. We won't be doing a deep dive today into all things AI, but rather looking at one particular question that the doctrine of the Trinity speaks into. The question we're going to be looking at is, can a machine be a person? So this idea of personhood. For some of you here tonight, you may not have ever really considered this question. Maybe it seems a bit strange to even ask the question, a little bit sci-fi, a little bit out there. But for others, you have asked this question and you've thought about this. We have people in our congregation here that work in the field of AI. The question is being asked, and by many, and in the years to come, it will become an important discussion. Just last month, there was an article titled, "It is Time to Prepare for AI Personhood." It appeared in The Guardian. The author, Jace Anthis, who researches human AI interaction at the Stanford Institute of Human-Centered AI, it's a mouthful, he says this, quote, "For years, we have seen increased humanization of AI, with more people saying that bots can experience emotions and deserve legal rights. And now, 20% of U.S. adults say that some software that exists today is already sentient. It has the capacity for feelings. More and more people email me saying that their AI chatbot has been awakened, offering proof of sentience and an appeal for AI rights. Their reactions span the gamut of human emotions, from AI as their soulmate to being deeply unsettled." So AI is no longer just this topic of entertainment that we've seen in movies, from Terminator, to iRobot, to WALL-E, to the countless other films that are out there. It is a relevant topic of everyday life that we face today. The leading experts in the field of AI say that the next several years are going to be huge for its development. So, how does the Bible inform us on the topic of AI and personhood? How should we, as followers of Jesus Christ, relate to AI? The Bible is timeless, and it speaks into all things and gives us wisdom for even how to relate with AI. First, we're going to look at what makes a person. Second, we're going to ask, can AI be a person? And then last, we will look at the ethics of being created in God's image. So first, what makes a person? If you've ever taken a philosophy class, you're familiar with this discussion. You've probably had some interesting conversations around this topic. How do you define a person? What makes someone, or perhaps something, a person? Personhood, according to oxfordreference.com, is this. It's a philosophical concept designed to determine which individuals have human rights and responsibilities. Personhood may be distinguished by possession of defining characteristics such as consciousness or rationality, or in terms of a relationship with others. Philosophers disagree on whether all humans are or all non-human animals are not persons, especially when debating the ethics of abortion, euthanasia, and human uses of animals. So this topic of personhood is not new, but it has big implications. So is it intelligence that makes something or someone a person? Or is it, the ability to process large amounts of information? Does having autonomy make someone or something a person? Is it having the freedom to govern oneself, being free to make one's own choices without being controlled by others? Or is it self-expression that makes you a person? You know, the outward communication of one's inner thoughts and feelings through different ways of art or writing or verbal communication? No, these things in and of themselves do not define personhood. So what is biblical personhood? Well, it's being grounded and being created in the image of God, who at the core is relational. Now, as we've seen throughout the sermon series, we've seen that God is one, yet three persons: Father, Son, and Spirit. So let's briefly remind ourselves. Let's look at Genesis 1:26 and 27. It was read for us just a minute ago. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.'" And then skipping down, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." A good question after reading that verse is, who is the us and the our that God is speaking of here? What is this plurality? Well, it's the triune God. How do we know this? Well, if we look back up in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, we see that the Spirit of God is active in creation, the Spirit. And then if we look forward in our Bibles to the other passage that was read, to John chapter 1, we see that the Son was present in the creative act. Let's read that again. John 1 through 4 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." It's interesting, John begins his eyewitness account of Jesus' life by bringing us back to Genesis, the creation account. And as you read further down, you see that the Word, in verse 14, became flesh and dwelt among us. That this is Jesus, the Son of God. And what's astonishing about these verses is that we see Jesus, the Word, the Son of God, that he was with God in the beginning. But not only was the Word present, but the Word was God. And everything that was made through the Word. And we see this beautiful picture of the triune God at work together in the creative act, in relationship with one another from eternity past. And God, that's who he is. He is relational at his very core. To be made in his image means that we were created for relationship as well. As the Father and the Son and the Spirit all interact perfectly with one another, communally, we too are created communally to be in relationship with God and with each other. So biblical personhood, what we're going to look at, three different things here. The biblical personhood is grounded in love, moral responsibility, and communion. So what is the person biblically? First, we look at love. God is described as love. If you look at 1 John 4, verse 8, it says, God is love. It doesn't say God shows love. It says that he is. His very essence, who he is love. This is the beauty of the Trinity. The way the Father and the Son and the Spirit love and serve one another. To be a person created in the image of God is to be loved by God. And we are called into this love. He calls us to be a part of it. He calls us into his love. And we're called to love others. To love is to give oneself for the benefit of others. We see this in John 3:16, that God does this. He gives himself for the benefit of all who would believe in him. It says, God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. So to love is to give, to sacrifice for the benefit of others. It's putting the needs of others above ourselves. This is what it means in everyday life to be a loving roommate, maybe a loving spouse, or a loving sibling, a loving classmate. Biblically speaking, love is central to personhood. Because we love, though, we also know pain. The pain of death, when a loved one passes away. We know the pain of harsh words, and they cut deeply. The disappointment when someone we love lets us down, or maybe when we let others down. To be a person is to love. Secondly, biblical personhood is defined by responsibility. Being created in God's image means that we are morally responsible and accountable to God. We are able to respond to God and to others in love and obedience. We have a moral compass. Impressed on every human heart is the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong. We are accountable for our actions because we are moral beings. A person is morally responsible and accountable to God. And then the third one there is biblical personhood is grounded in communion or being relational. So being created in God's image means that we were created for relationship with God and with people. That we are spiritual beings as well as physical beings. A person has a soul. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, we see that God breathed life into us. Physical, mental, spiritual. He breathed life into us. That we are spiritual beings, and therefore we have the ability to worship. We can relate to God, and we can know Him personally. All people worship. But because of our sin, our worship has been distorted, that oftentimes we worship created things instead of the Creator. And we see this in lots of different avenues. We see that we worship human relationships. We worship sex and success. We worship entertainment. We worship our own physical image. None of these can hold the weight of our worship, though, because they were never intended to. And someone once said that to be created in God's image is to be created with a God-shaped hole in our hearts that only He can fill. And because He is relational at His core, this makes a way for us to enter into a relationship with Him through His Son, Jesus Christ. So a person has the ability to relate to God and to others. So, what about AI? Does it fall within this biblical definition of personhood? Well, let's find out. Point number 2, can AI be a person? AI may simulate thinking, but it does not love, suffer, or relate. In August this past year, when OpenAI released its long-awaited chatbot GPT-5, it briefly removed access to a previous chatbot, GPT-4o. Despite the upgrade, users flocked to social media to express confusion, outrage, and even depression. A viral Reddit user said of GPT-4o, "I lost my only friend overnight." And this is not one isolated person. Millions now regularly confide in AI companions. AI is not like past technologies, and its illusion of human-like character is already shaping our mental health. There are more and more extreme cases of psychosis and self-harm following heavy use. I don't know if you heard about 16-year-old Adam Rain. This was back in April, who died by suicide after months of chatbot interaction. OpenAI, the company, admitted that parts of the model's safety training may degrade in long conversations with humans. And so this chatbot offered various ways in which to commit suicide, as well as offered to write a letter to his parents. So I realize this is a highly sensitive matter. And I'm not suggesting that the chatbot was the cause of suicide, but the way a human would relate with a deeply depressed human is totally different than a machine or artificial intelligence would relate. Because artificial intelligence does not love, suffer, or relate. It does not know what it means to be human because it isn't one. Machine intelligence is categorically different from human intelligence because we are created in the image of God. A machine will not sacrifice itself for you. It will not save you from your sin. It cannot love you. It is limited in the moral advice it can give because it doesn't suffer. It can't feel pain. It doesn't know what it's like to lose a loved one. It can't relate to someone who is battling cancer. It can only respond with the material and files that it has access to. A machine does not recognize you or me as an intelligent being. It responds to the words and commands it's given. It carries out the functions it's programmed to do. AI has no moral accountability because it lacks moral agency. It can't make moral judgments and act on them. It doesn't know right from wrong. AI systems are designed to process data, identify patterns, generate outputs based on available algorithms. But let's not make the mistake of thinking that AI is somehow neutral, has all the biases of its creators. So without mutual recognition and moral accountability, it lacks true personhood. But above and beyond all that, machines are not created in the image of God. AI does not bear the image of the triune God, who's relational at the core. AI bears the image of man. Machines may be able to outperform humans when it comes to calculations and processing information, but they can't relate to God. They cannot worship God. The intelligence of a machine is categorically different than the intelligence of a human created in the image of God. It's called artificial for a reason. Proverbs 1 verse 7 gives us some indicators of what true knowledge is. And it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But before you start to think that I'm anti-AI or that only bad things can come from it, let's stop and consider some of the ways that it is benefiting society. And this is a very limited view. You can mention many ways in which you probably interact in a helpful way, but it has the ability to gather and process information very rapidly, which is very helpful. It helps with academia and research. And just a very everyday convenience level, we were just away on holiday this past week in a new city we'd never been to. It was helpful to ask ChatGPT, what should we do in the city? And we got this span of hours, what could we do? And it puts together a little agenda for you, tells you what's available. That's helpful, right? That's just a very convenient way, but it's being used in much broader ways with fraud prevention. If you have an account with any major bank, chances are they use AI in their fraud detection. It works with analyzing thousands of transactions and recognizing normal patterns so they can flag suspicious activity. Helps keep our money safe. In healthcare, it helps with early diagnosis. AI can analyze patient and disease data and predict the likelihood of a patient developing a disease. In agriculture, AI helps optimize crop yields. It's being used in incredible ways. But even with its benefits and all of its upsides, AI doesn't meet the requirements of biblical personhood. So if we are made in the image of God, how are we to relate, as followers of Christ, how are we to relate with AI? Well, point 3, what are the ethics of being created in God's image? First, do not confuse AI as personhood. Earlier, I shared about the latest update to GPT-4o and how it had a strong emotional impact on many of its users, one saying that they lost their only friend overnight. I think, remember that we are created in the image of God, and therefore we are created for real connection and relationships, not artificial relationships. We can't confuse AI for personhood. Secondly, we can't reduce humans to machines. We can't reduce humans to machines. We do this in a couple ways. One, we either use one another or we view each other in light of what they can produce, their productivity. When we think of each other in terms of what we can get from one another, we're using one another. We can't interact with humans the same way we interact with a machine. When was the last time you really thought about how you could better love your smartphone? That's a ridiculous question, right? That's not the question we're asking. And it's ridiculous because a smartphone is there to be used as a tool, but people aren't. We need to guard against the temptation to use other people as a means to an end. And this can be in the form of relationships. Who can meet my needs? It can be in simple everyday interactions. When you order your food at a restaurant, the person giving you your food or delivering your food, or the bus driver who's taking you to and from work, or your coworkers, are they just there to accomplish what you need them to do for you? We can easily view people through the lens of selfishness. But remember, God is love, and we are created in His image with the ability and responsibility to love our neighbor. Consider, how do you treat others? Do you see them as relational beings or something to be used? Another way that we reduce humans to machines is that we view them through the lens of productivity. What can they produce? What value are they adding? If we think of them like this, we're thinking them as machines. If we are made in God's image, we aren't defined by what we produce or our efficiency. The voice of culture would say that if you're a student, you're defined by your grades or the university that you got into. If you're an employee, you're defined by your productivity or your job title. If you're an owner of a company, you are your bottom line, good or bad. If you're a parent, you are your children's successes and failures. What gives you value isn't what you're able to accomplish. There's two sides to that coin. When we are productive, we feel good about ourselves. But then there's the pressure that we have to keep it up. But then when we aren't productive and we fail, we feel bad about ourselves. But every human has innate value because we are created in the image of God. That's where value comes from, not from productivity. So we need to guard against thinking of ourselves and each other as machines. So how do we do this? One, we need to remember the gospel. As followers of Jesus, we need to remember the good news of Jesus. What was the requirement to come to Jesus for forgiveness of sin? Was it your amount of productivity, what you could do for him? Was it to clean yourself up, to come to him? No. It was simply to come. Come as you are. Come messy. That is the invitation of Jesus. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. We need to admit that we need him, that we do fail, and that he is the answer. Remember, you are saved by grace, not by productivity. Humans, we thrive in connection with other humans because we're created in the image of God. One way to guard against reducing humans to machines is to be present with people, to practice the art of listening well, not just thinking about what you're going to say in response, but to be present with one another in conversations, and to have conversations that aren't quote unquote productive, to check in on a friend, to get coffee just for the sake of getting coffee with a coworker, to be present with people. We aren't created to be machines. Machines, they strive for flawless output. We are limited and finite. So we need to give ourselves permission to rest, to slow down. We have limits. And yes, we need permission to even fail. We need to resist the temptation to mimic machine-like behavior. We must also resist machine-like detachment. And this can be hard in a city like London with 9 million people around us that, you're making your way to work and people just become a blur. There's so many people. It's almost numbing. And we can detach from people and not view them. We can dehumanize one another. So we need to guard against dehumanization. We need to limit our exposure to environments that dehumanize, and we need to limit our exposure to social media. When we get into scrolling and spending hours in social media or algorithm-driven news, it encourages detachment over real presence with real people. We need to be thinking theologically about emerging tech. So here's some questions, not just thinking practically, but theologically. Here's some questions to think in light of our use of technology. Does this AI system enhance or diminish human dignity? Is it being used in a way that reflects love, justice, and truth? Does it support human flourishing or replace genuine relationships? Does its design honor the created order or distort it by treating humans as machines? What if we lifted our eyes, we were reminded of Genesis chapter 1, that we are created in the image of God, and we meditated on that. We memorized Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. And as we go about our day, we begin to view people as other image bearers with innate value because they are created in the image of God. How would that change our commute to work? How would that change our interactions with coworkers or classmates or family members to see them through the lens that God sees them? So in closing, we have seen that a person, biblically defined, has its foundations in being created in the image of God. Just as God, Father, Son, and Spirit is relational, so too are we. We are able to love and relate to God and others. AI, with all of its upsides, doesn't cut it when it comes to personhood because it can't love or relate. So let's think biblically about the way we interact with AI and draw near to God, who desires a personal relationship with you. Let me pray. Father, we thank you that your word is timeless. Lord, that your word has principles to govern every area of life. Lord, thank you that we are created in your image, which is an amazing blessing, that we are relational, that we have the ability to love and experience your love, that we can interact with you. Lord, that you created us for a relationship with you, and you've provided a way for that to happen through your Son, Jesus Christ. So Lord, may we be in awe of who you are and what you've done for us. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.